It's time for Where You Live with Gene and Tony, the show that's all about owning, buying, selling, renting, and association management. If it involves a home, we'll talk about it. Here's your chance to get your homeowner questions answered. From the Concierge Landscape Studios, here's Gene and Tony.
Needed the shelter of someone's arms, and there you were. Needed someone to understand my
Good morning and a good Saturday morning to you. Welcome to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. I'm Gene Sullivan.
I'm Tony Crockett.
And we've got a fantastic show for you today. We've got some real interesting stories. We're going to be talking first of all about a story from Duluth, Minnesota. We know how the housing market has affected people here in the Twin Cities, but in outstate Minnesota too. There are some issues that they're dealing with, and we're going to grapple with some of those here on the show this morning as well. We are also going to deal with a story we've talked about before out of the state of Nevada. We talked about this maybe a few months ago. There was a new law that came into effect by the state legislature, putting a cap on the amount of collection costs that an association could ask for when asking for delinquent homeowner association dues. Well, it looks like that was overturned, and so we're going to take a look at that as well. So with that, and without further ado, let's get going with property management in the news. Property management in the news is brought to you by Pest Control Services. When you need to get rid of unwanted pests in your home or rental property, call someone who's responsive, professional, and a proud member of Angie's List. Give owner Greg Keener a call at 952-894-9748, Pest Control Services. Well, our first story was coming out of Channel 19, the Northland News Center up in Duluth, Minnesota, an NBC affiliate. And they were talking on a three-part series on housing. And they began about a week ago on a story saying it's already hard enough for low-income individuals to rise above the poverty line. But in Duluth, their situation is made even more difficult due to extremely high rents and a lack of affordable housing. They went on to say that Duluth had some of the highest rates in terms of the rental burden that it placed on individuals than anywhere else in the state of Minnesota. They didn't mention where they got those statistics. It would have been interesting to know. But they said it's becoming more and more difficult, and they began in their story talking about a couple. And they said the couple was making below $30,000 a year, husband and wife, and the cost of renting was becoming extremely burdensome. The woman was quoted as saying in the story, "I'm basically looking for a one-bedroom, and the rent is sky high." And you get the idea from this entire story that they're talking about that there needs to be someone who will come in and intervene.
Well, they're saying more affordable housing is needed. Now, I don't have an argument with that. I think that's true. They say the gap they're talking about is that there's the largest affordability gap is in Duluth in the entire state of Minnesota, meaning the rent amounts versus income amounts. There's a big gap there. So there are a lot of people that can't find affordable rentals in Duluth. There's another reason is that rents have gone up 20% in the last 10 years, and income there has only risen 4% in the last 10 years. So I think it's a real problem.
Okay.
But as in most things, the devil is in the solutions that people come up with.
Sometimes I think you're right. That's certainly true. We certainly know that anytime you're dealing with any given period of time anywhere, you have what's called the free market, and things are going to ebb and flow. a few years ago when I think everybody was enjoying the fact that the vacancy rates were higher, costs weren't
higher than they'd ever been.
Yes.
In 50 or 60 years. Yeah.
Rental rates weren't going up. In many cases, they were staying the same or even going below what they were the year before.
I would say, generally speaking, they were going down and landlords were really struggling to keep their rental properties viable. Mm-hmm. They couldn't find renters because everyone was buying homes with this cheap financing, right?
Yeah. And the crux of the story and why I wanted to bring that up this morning for our discussion here is that they were talking about, with this in mind now this is the situation you have in Duluth. Now people need to turn to government for assistance. And then they said, but unfortunately, the demand is even more than the city can accommodate. And it leaves or begs the question, how much more should government be involved with?
There always is a waiting list for Section 8 vouchers. Now it's an even greater time that you have to wait for a Section 8 voucher in Duluth. And Gene, we talk about this all the time. We cannot keep turning to the government to solve every problem we have. And this problem of a lack of affordable housing, they're talking about this couple wants to find a one-bedroom apartment. They can't afford a one-bedroom apartment. So perhaps they should look at alternatives. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like you had mentioned some in our prep today.
So what they were saying is, here was a couple, they gave it an example, and they said, here's the standard that we feel is the bottom that we should be looking for.
This is,
Anything less would be unacceptable.
Yeah.
I think is basically what they're saying.
I think that's exactly what they're saying.
And so they said, and in that case, we live in a society now, it seems like it's very apparent that when I can't do something for myself readily,
something that I want for myself,
then I need to turn to the government and say, what are you going to do about it?
Well, you and I ended up talking about our youth when we were first starting out in the world and what the things we had to do and the adjustments we had to make. I came from a home. There were 8 people in my family. We came from a large home in South Minneapolis, middle class. I had my own bedroom my entire life. But when I moved out of the house, I couldn't afford that kind of housing. I couldn't even afford my own bedroom.
So did you have a different standard of living?
My standard of living changed dramatically. My very first apartment was a one-bedroom apartment that 3 girls shared. And it was tiny. Yeah. But the 3 of us shared one bedroom. We had bunk beds and a rollaway in there. Yeah. And that's what we did because we were so excited to have our own place and to get out of the house and start becoming adults. That's what you had to do in order to make your dreams a reality. Mm-hmm.
What's interesting in this whole idea or notion of the government and government assistance, I think there have been some words over the years that have been interchanged, but they have completely different meanings.
Like what?
When this couple talks about they have a standard, the standard is a one-bedroom apartment where the husband and wife would live together just by themselves within a certain percentage of their total income being paid so that they have some extra spending as well. That's the standard. Well, when you talk about a standard, is that the same as a right?
Yes, good point.
And over the years, I think that because we have done well as a country, and I certainly don't want to give the impression that that there isn't hardship in the United States, or that there isn't, that there isn't poverty.
Right.
But a lot of people, what they are calling that poverty line makes me wonder, and that what they're talking about as a standard, something that you would aspire to, has now become something that is my fundamental right.
Right. Seems that's the baseline where you want to start. Now, what are some of the things you did, Gene, when you were first starting out?
Boy, I think when I first left to go to college, and I went and had the great opportunity of putting myself through college, I ended up having 4 other roommates. So
sure.
there was 5 of us in a 2-bedroom
Okay.
apartment, and that worked out.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I got married, and right outside of college, my wife and I had 2 small children. We had a home, but the home that we had certainly wasn't in a prestigious area. It was probably in
it was
an
inner
area.
city. It was inner city. It
Inner
was
city.
low cost housing.
Lower
because
cost
that's where you
housing.
had to start.
That's what I could
correct?
afford. And we even had to take in additional roommates on a couple of the other floors above us
Okay.
to be able to make ends meet. And I thought that was okay.
That's how we were raised to do it. That's how we were taught to do it.
Yes, and I'd like us to talk a little bit more about this idea, standard or right, when it comes to housing. We'll tackle that after these messages.